Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Resolve to Live Forward. Thank you for tuning into the podcast. This is John Morrow. I hope you're doing well. We are now down to the Friday before Christmas. So if you are in any way, form, shape, or fashion thinking about that, I know that it's just a very, very hectic time. I want to express my appreciation for you listening to this podcast. It comes out every Friday on multiple podcast sites at 12 noon Eastern Time. I do want to express my appreciation to Buzzsprout, the podcast hosting platform. I am not just recording this as an audio podcast, but also as a video podcast. And I wanted to let you know that I have a Resolve to Live Forward YouTube channel under John Morrow, and I hope that you'll find me there if you want to watch and also get a chance to meet me in person. I must sadly tell you that all of the episodes that I have recorded of this particular podcast are not on the YouTube channel, but I'm now at least at the point where I'm consistently putting these podcasts up on YouTube on a weekly basis, as well as the ones that I'm putting up. And by the way, you may be listening to this on a particular podcast platform. If you do communicate with me, let me know where you heard me at. I know that I'm on Spotify and I'm in the iTunes store, the Apple store, if you prefer to call it that, and some other platforms. And I can share that with you at some point. But the key thing is this podcast is generally a monologue. I'm hoping as we move into 2026 that I can begin to transition some guests to come in and talk. One of the wonderful things about this past year, particularly for me, has been the amazing people that I've had the pleasure of meeting through many different kinds of connections, some very random and some of them very intentional through Toastmasters, for example, which I am a Toastmaster and have been actively in Toastmasters for a number of years. But these guests have some incredible stories, and I'm just hoping that I can bring them on because I think they fit with what it is that I'm trying to do for you who are listening and watching. By the way, the website that I have is johnmorrowcoaching.com. My email is johnmorrowcoaching@gmail.com. And of course, this is Resolved to Live Forward. That's the title of the podcast. Thank you for being here today. I'm going to begin with a statement here. I'm going to talk about this as we continue to flesh out this journey of not letting your, not just your losses, although I do deal with loss. I deal with the devastation that takes place when you experience something traumatic in your life. In my case, watching my wife die. Other people have gone through the death series, but there are also traumas where you've been perhaps involved in a motor vehicle accident, or you have had an act of violence committed to you, or you've been in a very, very abusive relationship. Perhaps you have a broken marriage where you really were committed to it, but your partner walked away from you. There is, as I've said before, people who had their dream job, or so they hoped it would be their dream job, that they could work for years and years and years, and unexpectedly it was yanked from underneath them. And it's happened to me before. It happened to my late wife, as a matter of fact, many, many years ago. I remember that time when it happened to her, and she was deeply, deeply traumatized by it because it was so unexpected. There is the issue of receiving a diagnosis in a medical situation and what that means to you. Perhaps, like me, you've heard that word, the C word, and other things of that sort. And I come from a family on my mother's side that was afflicted and was ravaged by Alzheimer's. So many other things that traumatize us. People had a house fire. It didn't burn the house down, but an important part of the house was destroyed. And in that was a lot of memories and keepsakes. There were photo albums. There was a wedding book, a wedding album, and there were all kinds of mementos and precious memories. And they were destroyed and they can't be recovered because the fires have occurred before people had the opportunity to get them digitized and possibly saved. And some things you can't replace. It's just that way it is. You can't change what happens to you. And this is a phrase that I have often said as I am a professional speaker. I tell people you can't change what happens to you, but you can change how what happens to you shapes you going forward. There is this thing. It's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you. And it's true that this particular mindset doesn't just apply in what messaging I'm talking about here in the field of people dealing with devastation, sorrow, anguish, trauma, loss, uh, being treated unfairly, being abused, being hurt, being damaged, losing things, suffering, being financially bankrupt, so many things that happen in life. You've heard the phrase, life isn't fair. It's a true phrase. Nobody said life was fair, but a lot of people would like to think it could be. I'd like to think that even though life may not be fair, life can be more fair than not fair. But everybody has a different set of circumstances, and I'm not the sole messenger in that situation. What I am is a person who feels at this stage of his life, I want to give something to people that will give them something meaningful to push forward with. In thinking about that, I think it's important for us to understand that we have to bring ourselves to the point where we think about, we focus on not just what's happened to us, but we try to, as they say, climb out above it and get that 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 foot view looking down at it so that we can see a much bigger expanse. And if we stop long enough to allow ourselves to see the bigger picture, we realize we are just one of literally hundreds upon hundreds or maybe thousands upon thousands of people who have experienced not just one, but many traumatic events and devastating events in their lives. And they're trying to find a way forward. The degree and severity is important. I was tested after my wife's death, a couple of years after it. I was tested for PTSD. And I did, based upon the examination, turn up on the scale with a score. However, that score was not severe. And to kind of give you the perspective, my particular situation in comparison to that of someone coming back from a war zone who had been in fighting almost hand to hand and had watched their comrades at arms die, or those who work as first responders who go to the scene of some of the most horrific and devastating things possible, and others such as emergency room personnel, those first responders. There are a lot of people out there that are in far more difficult situations, law enforcement, fire department. They see things. They're exposed to things and they don't get to pick and choose. It comes with the job. And the emotional effect that that has, the pictures that are left in their mind, cause this post-traumatic stress disorder. But there are people that experience PTSD in varying degrees, even if the particular type of trauma is not as horrific as what they do. So it's not a question of minimizing somebody, nor is it a question of marginalizing others who have gone through something like what I went through, where I saw my wife die. The thing that's going on here is that you don't get over that. You have to find a way through counseling and professional care, and sometimes pharmaceuticals such as antidepressants. I took antidepressants for a number of years. These are the things that help us to begin to develop some coping mechanisms. And I'll just come back to it again. That phrase that I said here on a piece of paper, and I'm quoting here. You can't change what happened, but you can change how you let it shape you. I guess what I'm trying to say is that we can't allow the grief, the sorrow, the anguish, we can't allow those things to define us. And we have got to work on that in our conscious mind during the day through processes, which I have some things that I've been fortunate to have come into my life. If you know my story of my power word and how my late wife and I picked those 7 behaviors based upon the 7 letters in the word resolve, Resolve. And by doing so, it gave me a template to work with. Now, does that template represent the solution? No, no solution. Does that template, though, represent the need or the lack of a need for professional care? That's not true either. I needed professional care. I needed someone to actually sit down with me, a professional mental health counselor, to work with me on my feelings. But there was a good thing for me in that I had a framework that I could work with. You may not have such a thing. That's why I wrote the book, Resolve Your Blueprint for Intentional Success, because that's a good blueprint, not just for persons who are going through difficult times from an emotional point of view due to some kind of horrific situation or difficult situation or painful situation or traumatic situation, but it's a great tool for people who are trying to find a way forward to develop a program to create success in their life and to develop and move themselves forward in a very positive manner and achieve their goals. So it can tie in very much to a motivational strategy, a success strategy, a productivity strategy. The mindset process is one where you have to really, though, see that, as I said before, when you get to that high view up in the altitude, realize that this group is spread out across so many different people. And this type of difficulty, this type of struggle that we go through, this unwanted change, happens to all kinds of people. And it's not just about death and dying, it's so much more than that. It is my intention to talk about that in my TED Talk that I'll be doing in February of 2026. This is the approach that I want to bring to the table with you as I have these discussions. I want you to begin to realize we are a much larger community of people than we give ourselves credit for. You have emotions and feelings and have gone through difficulties, and those have validity. They have merit. And if you don't have the wherewithal to find the time to lift your head up from your sorrow and your feeling sorry for yourself, and I'm not being critical, but you need to be willing to ask for help. You need to begin to realize that if you don't find a way to move forward, and here's a phrase that I'm going to be using in my presentation when I do my TED Talk in February. If you don't do something with your sorrow, with your anguish, with your pain, I can promise you that that sorrow, anguish, and pain will make the choice for you. They'll make it for you. You will succumb to them. If that is what is preoccupying us, is that sorrow, and we're not thinking in the idea of one step at a time, moving in a forward direction, we will simply begin to decline. You can find yourself figuratively curling up into a cocoon or into a fetal position and simply waiting to die. I've talked about my favorite motion picture. Now, I have a top five, and I'm not going to share that top five with you. And I will tell you that the top five, there might be, if I continue to see from time to time truly great motion pictures that are meaningful to me, and every one of us have different tastes when it comes to something like that. But at the top of my list of these favorite movies that I would watch again and again and again, they're just that good, is The Shawshank Redemption. I will tell you that that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a fan of Stephen King. And I don't say that to be disrespectful to Mr. King. I'm just not a big fan of Stephen King in general terms. But the novella, which by the way is not entitled The Shawshank Redemption, but I forget, I think it's Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption or something like that. And it is a novella, so it's not a lengthy story. When they wrote the screenplay for it, they fleshed it out into a story that was far more expansive. And the only reason why that motion picture probably didn't capture the hearts and minds of people more quickly during the course of the year that it came out was that it came out the same year as Forrest Gump. And Forrest Gump just took theaters by storm and took the nation by storm. And by the way, Forrest Gump was a great movie. But The Shawshank Redemption is special to me because every time I watch it, I keep picking up more nuanced information, but there's a core story there. And the core story has to do, at least in my way of thinking, with how a man who experienced betrayal and then actually considered taking things into his own hands and seeking to destroy the life of the woman he loved and her lover, but then did not have the wherewithal to do so. And a lot of people would say he was a coward. No, he made the right choice, but he was also in a drunken stupor at the time and didn't even know what he was doing. And then, of course, he was unjustly tried and convicted and sentenced to a life sentence in a prison that, at least fictionally speaking, was in Maine. They filmed it, though, at a prison that actually does exist, and it's in the state of Ohio because the scene was just so dark and dank and oppressive, and it was the perfect location. But the performances of these individuals in the motion picture was amazing. And the story of Andy Dufresne, the guy who was unjustly convicted, is a story of a journey that is full of surprises for us because it's being narrated by Morgan Freeman, who also plays Red. And Red, of course, becomes Andy's tightest friend, and Andy becomes Red's closest friend. There are a lot of other great people in there, and there's some interesting stories, and there's some hard stuff to have to digest. But it's a movie that you have to really just surrender yourself to it and allow it to speak to you through the roles that you play or the roles that you see played out before you. And like I said, I never tire of watching it, and every time I watch it, I'm equally inspired. But at the same time, too, I see more things that come out there and surprise me. But I say all of that to say this as we begin to wrap up this particular podcast, because this has to do with that thing I was talking about, where you have to make that choice. Because if you don't choose to do something with your sorrow is going to make that choice for you. You have to look at Andy when he was at that point after finally losing what appeared to be his last hope of being exonerated for the crime that he was unjustly convicted of. But due to the selfish nature of the prison warden and other persons in that particular prison, the one possible way for the truth to come out that he was not the murderer of his wife and her lover was killed, murdered at the order of the prison warden. And that conversation where Andy had talked to Red about hope, that there's something to hope for, there's something better on the outside, coupled with the story just beneath it of the institutionalization that creates a certain type of comfort level for the inmate because they don't have to worry about a place to sleep, food to eat. They don't have to worry about having clothes to wear or being able to take care of themselves or having medical care because everything is done for them and everything that they do, they're told when they can do it and when they can't do it. And here he is talking about hope. And of course, Red's been in the prison a whole lot longer than Andy. And by this time, Andy's been in prison for almost 20 years, or at least 20 years. And Red simply tells him, you need to stop talking about hope because if talking about hope in a place like this, it'll drive you crazy. It'll make you go mad. And to this day, I've never forgotten that phrase where Andy says, yeah, you're probably right, or you may be right. I'm not quoting it verbatim. But he does say to Red, it comes down to this: get busy living or get busy dying. That's the key point that I want to make. The story goes on from there. It's got a whole lot more footage after that. And it's an amazing story, one that I never stop enjoying. But the truth of the matter is, I was at a place in my life where I could have said, you got two choices: get busy living or get busy dying. I chose to get busy living, but trust me when I tell you, I didn't make that totally on my own. I had to have help. And I had people that were there to help me, and there were things that were sent my way that helped me to be able to see that this was not a period at the end of my life. It was simply a comma. And that comma was telling me that there was more of the story to be written. That's the point that I want to get across to you. The reason why we do this is because the resolve mindset gives you framework for living forward. I share it with you not because it's a miracle working process. It's a process that requires you do the work. But the hardest work you will do is going to be what you do with your mind, because it's your mind that's going to give you the ability to either basically let it come to an end, or it's your mind that's going to give you the ability, the resolve to take steps in a forward direction. Little steps at the beginning, but with each step, you're moving forward and you're getting back your meaningfulness and perhaps even some vibrancy. All of this is quite possible. I believe it with all my heart. That's why I do this podcast. I'm looking for people who have a sense and have been there, have felt that, and they're trying to do something about that, or they're wondering, is there something they can do about that? That's why I'm here. That's why I do it. It's not for everybody. I get that. And I hope you get me and understand my desire is not for you to think about what my situation was. My desire is to help you find a way to move forward in your situation and to make a positive difference and to be there because there are people in this world who are going to need you. Believe me when I tell you. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. Since when the next week's episode comes out, it will be after Christmas Day. I want to take the opportunity right now, because this is where I come from, to wish you a Merry Christmas. Not all of you listening are people of faith and don't observe Christmas or don't observe the Christmas message that is contained in Scripture, and that's okay. It's not about that. It's about the fact that the holiday season, I think, is a season of giving, more so giving than receiving. And also in giving, It's the idea of passing something on and sharing it with other people that will help their lives to be more meaningful. So I want to wish that for you. Thank you for tuning in today on the Friday before Christmas. And by the grace of God, if all goes well, I look forward to seeing you on the Friday before New Year's. All of that coming as we begin to wind down and wrap up 2025. I hope you'll join me. Thank you for joining me for this episode. Remember again, this is Resolve to Live Forward. I'm John Morrow. And if you would like to reach out to me and let me know that you are listening and ask me any other questions, please be kind. I mean well. Reach out to me at my email address, John Morrow Coaching. That's John Morrow Coaching at gmail.com. Thanks so very, very much. We're out of time. As a matter of fact, we're way out of time. Appreciate you joining me. I look forward to seeing you for our episode a week from now. Until then, so long, and remember, keep living forward.